Culture evolves at the speed of light, just like your financial needs. When it comes to your money, Credit Karma keeps you in the know and ahead of the game. You can count on Credit Karma to keep up with your financial needs as they evolve. We'll help you monitor your progress and give personalized recommendations so you can make strides towards your goals and find your way to money. Make sure you're on the right track, no matter where you are on your financial journey. Intuit Credit Karma. Karma you can count on.
Meet the most capable CR-V Honda has ever dreamed of. The all-new CR-V Trail Sport Hybrid. With all-terrain tires and available enhanced traction control, it's built for wherever the day takes you. Heated front seats and a heated steering wheel? Ideal for winter drives and crisp early starts. And with generous cargo space, it's ready for big gear and even bigger getaways. The CR-V Trail Sport Hybrid. Learn more at honda.com/CRV.
This episode is brought to you by Blink, an Amazon company. Think you're ready for Prime Day? With up to 50% off Blink Smart Security, you will be. With crisp HD video, real-time alerts, and two-way talk, you'll know the moment your packages arrive. Save big on Blink Smart Security, starting at just $19.99 with the Blink Mini 2 plug-in camera. Shop now at amazon.com/blink.
Ray-Ban Meta glasses are powered by Meta AI, so you can get real-time answers.
Hey, Meta, how bougie is Jade Garden?
It's a trendy spot.
What's a color that pairs with this top?
Consider dark, earthy colors, charcoal or black.
What are some good first date topics?
Consider discussing favorite travel destinations or your favorite books.
Get suggestions, inspiration, and answers from your glasses. Ray-Ban Meta glasses. Iconic style meets Meta AI.
Excuse me, Laurie.
Oh, Mr. Brackett, I'm sorry, Mr. Brackett.
Oh, I didn't mean to startle you.
That's all right.
You know, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
What's up, everyone? I'm your host, Will, and you're listening to One Good Scare, the show where we explore our favorite horror movies. Today, we're jumping into what lots of folks consider to be one of the best werewolf movies of all time, The Howling. I'll start with a quick confession. It'd been years since I last watched The Howling, and I'm generally not a huge fan of werewolf movies. But I'm glad this was requested, because I was pleasantly surprised with how much I enjoyed this one. As always, you can follow One Good Scare on Instagram at OneScarePod and TikTok at One Good Scare Pod. Make sure to follow and leave a comment or two. I absolutely love interacting and discussing. Also, be sure to leave a 5-star review on Spotify and Apple Pods. It lets me know you're enjoying the show, and that goes a long way to keeping it going. And remember, as always, my goal with One Good Scare is not to replace your viewing experience. It's to enhance it. So if you've never seen The Howling, or maybe if it's just been a while, my strong encouragement is to watch it first and then come back and give the show a listen. Of course, if you'd rather listen than watch, I appreciate that as well. Just remember, one good scare is one gigantic spoiler. Alright, it's time to settle in as we explore a classic werewolf flick, The Howling. Here's something you may not know. The Howling spurred 7 sequels, with the most recent in 2011. I've only seen the first, but I've heard a few of them are worth watching. With rare exception, The Howling often makes the best of werewolf movie lists, and it was the first in a decade full of werewolf movies, including An American Werewolf in London, Teen Wolf, Silver Bullet, Wolfen, and more. But where does it sit within the larger context of these movies? IMDb has it at a 6.5 out of 10, Rotten Tomatoes at 75%, and TV Guide at 68%. By comparison, An American Werewolf in London is scored by IMDb at a 7.5 out of 10. Teen Wolf sits at a 6.1. Silver Bullet is at a 6.4. And Wolfen is at a 6.3. One of the most important aspects of The Howling is the use of practical effects, which to this day are still pretty terrific. I think personally, the movie still holds up largely because of the special effects. And did you know, special effects artist Rob Bottin might be a familiar name? And if he's not, he should be, because he's worked on some of the most well-known and iconic movies, including RoboCop, Seven, The Fog, and my personal favorite, The Thing. His creations are legitimately a work of art, and in The Howling, the werewolf transformations are especially gruesome. One last thing before we jump into the movie. I think it's worth paying close attention to, because on the surface, it may come across as a campy werewolf flick, but beneath the surface, it's a super smart satire with a few poignant themes. Alright, it's time to settle down and turn down the lights as we explore one of the best werewolf movies ever made, The Howling. The movie opens with creepy synth music and red claw slashes which fade into the title of the movie, The Howling, as a werewolf howls. The screen shatters as a staticky TV plays on the screen. With the opening credits done, we see the face of a man seemingly in a dark bedroom. The scene then cuts to a newsroom, where two people are discussing the duality of man. The woman is then shown walking down an alley as news executives leak video footage of a dead body. The woman walks into a phone booth with a smiley face sticker, where she begins talking to a group of men in the newsroom, and as police officers patrol the area, they're clearly looking for someone. The scene cuts to a bathroom as a newscaster is rehearsing his lines in the mirror. We find out the woman is Karen White, a news anchor who had been receiving mysterious phone calls from a stranger named Eddie. Suddenly, another man comes in and the newscaster adjusts his tie and begins talking in his normal voice. As the man steps out, the newscaster goes back to rehearsing his lines. Karen, still in the phone booth, tells the men in the newsroom that there's a man outside the phone booth, and she's unsure if it's Eddie. As they hear this, the men are introduced to the man who walked into the bathroom. His name is Bill, and he's Karen White's husband. Suddenly, the phone rings and Karen picks it up. The officers in the room work to trace the call. Karen confirms she's alone, and the caller asks if she's wearing what he asked her to. She confirms this, but the line goes staticky, and the officers tracing the call are unable to hear her. Karen tells Eddie she'll be there in just a little while, though we're not sure where she's going. Bill talks to the officers and expresses concerns about his wife meeting with Eddie without protection. As Karen walks, she notices the area is full of adult movie theaters and shops. She walks into one and heads to the back towards a private booth. Eerie music plays as she walks. She chooses the booth, with a smiley face sticker on it. As she walks in, a hand puts a coin into a slot, which starts a porn movie. He remains in the shadows, but Karen confirms it's Eddie. At first, she attempts to turn around, but he puts his hands on her shoulders and tells her to watch. Meanwhile, police are looking frantically for Karen, and are pointed in the right direction by a woman who says she saw her just a few minutes before. Tensions are high as the officers and Karen's husband sit and wait. Karen is still in the room with Eddie, who is still shrouded in shadows. He tells her they didn't feel a thing, likely referring to the women he killed. He tells Karen that she's different and that he watches her on TV. Karen sits there silently as Eddie tells her he is going to quote-unquote light up her whole body. Suddenly, a deep growling voice says, "Turn around now, Karen." She turns to face Eddie, who is still shrouded in shadows. Karen, seeing him, struggles to scream. The police by now are out at the front desk, and the clerk tells them he saw Karen come in earlier, and that she's still there watching movies. Karen lets out a stifled scream as she is attacked by Eddie. The officers hear her and move quickly towards the screening room. As one officer approaches, he shoots into the room. Karen falls to the ground, unharmed but afraid. Eddie, meanwhile, has been shot and killed, with blood pooling on the floor next to the broken glass. The store owner rushes out, and laments letting Karen go back to the screening room. The news immediately picks up the story, highlighting Eddie's slaying. As investigators arrive on scene, it's discovered that Eddie had no weapon prior to being killed. Karen is led away by her husband, and she looks around in a daze as bystanders start to gather around. She attempts to give a statement, but struggles to remember the incident. The scene shifts to the daytime, where Karen is asleep on the couch. She's having flashbacks of the attack. First the smiley face, then the movie, before screaming and being awakened by Bill. Karen says she turned around but didn't see Eddie, and she holds on to Bill as she sobs. In the next scene, two journalists walk into Eddie's apartment, which is covered in newspaper clippings and drawings of the murders. The two walk around, before a huge dog startles them by jumping in the window. Suddenly, the female journalist, whose name is Terry, picks up a picture of Karen, who may have become the next victim had the police not intervened. The camera then pans around the room, where pictures of hairy men and women, who look almost animalistic, cover the walls. Terry and the male journalist, whose name is Chris, find a landscape and bring it to a psychiatrist who analyzes the drawing and gives his opinion. The killer was using his creative brain. Chris and Terry are planning to do a special on Eddie and want the psychiatrist's participation. The scene quickly cuts to Karen and Bill, who are trying to be intimate, except Karen has a flashback and she's unable to continue. The next scene takes us back to the newsroom, where Karen is getting ready to give an interview as the only survivor of Eddie the Mangler. As the news goes live, Karen takes her seat, but she has flashbacks as she looks into the camera and freezes. They quickly cut to another segment, and Karen is taken from the news desk. We then see her meeting with the psychiatrist as she explains what she remembers from her dreams, even though she's still unable to remember much. She asks the doctor, "How crazy am I?" And he tells her, "Completely benign." He then tells her that she and her husband need to go to the colony, a private getaway where she can receive specialized treatment in a calm retreat-like location. We then watch as Bill and Karen drive the windy mountain roads to the colony. Karen says she's not sure if she wants to remember, but Bill encourages her to give it a chance. A quick cutscene takes us to the colony, which is full of people dancing, singing, and cooking food on a spit. They introduce themselves to others, with a few folks being starstruck that Karen White is in their midst. Live music plays in the background throughout the scene, and as Bill wanders over to get a bite to eat, a woman named Marcia offers him a drink. She flirts with him, though Bill resists her and walks off to look for Karen. She's sitting with the psychiatrist, whose name is Dr. Wagner, when Marcia walks up and hands him a book. He tells Karen that there is much to learn from Marcia, despite her aggressive demeanor. Bluegrass continues playing in the background as people mingle, talk, and dance. Suddenly, an old man yells as he is manhandled and prevented from ending it. Dr. Wagner helps settle him down, and the bluegrass music picks right back up. The scene then shifts to the cabin as Karen and Bill are asleep. She's startled awake by flashbacks and a dream of the old man yelling. She tries to wake Bill, but he's sound asleep. She gets up from the bed and walks over to the window, where the sound of frogs and crickets fill the air. She looks out and hears a wolf howling. She runs to Bill to get him up, and she tells him that something is out there. But Bill dismisses it as the wind, or someone's dog, or something else, and encourages her to get back to sleep. Karen gets back into bed and tries to drift off. We then see her using a poker to start a fire. Then we watch a first-person point of view of someone, or something, walking towards the cabin. Karen senses that something is out there, and walks out the door with a flashlight. Whatever is out there is stalking in the bushes as Karen walks down the stairs. She hears a groan and pans the flashlight, but then she hears a howl in the distance and quickly runs back up the stairs and into the cabin. The camera then pans to the bushes, where one of the guests from earlier is watching silently. He smiles strangely. The next day, Karen says she heard something strange as she and another guest play tennis. Karen is introduced to the sheriff, who, like others, is starstruck. She tells him she heard howling as the two walk. The next scene takes us to the morgue, where the two journalists, Chris and Terry, are talking with the medical examiner. They're looking for information on Eddie Quist. When they go to pull his body out of cold storage, they're all shocked to find it gone. Scratches are seen on the inside of the freezer door. Karen and Donna are now sitting outside in the dark as cows moo in the background. Karen is concerned about the sound, and the two hear strange yelling in the distance. They walk, flashlight and rifle in hand, and continue talking in the darkness. Suddenly, they find a dead cow in their path, just as the flashlight goes out. They try, without looking, to turn it back on. They're startled as two men walk up behind them. The next day, Bill is taking rifle lessons as several men go hunting in the woods. They talk about the cattle mutilations as Karen walks up and says she doesn't want Bill to go hunting. Bill goes off with the men, and we watch as they walk through the woods, eyes up and rifles in hand. The scene shifts to Karen in a group therapy session as she recalls her encounter with Eddie. Dr. Wagner is leading the group, and he encourages Karen to tell him what she sees when she turns around to look at Eddie, but she's still unable to. We then watch as Bill fires his rifle, killing a rabbit. The next scene takes us to a used occult bookstore as two nuns walk in. Terry and Chris are also searching for something, and the shopkeeper is asked for a book on groups who participate in corpse stealing. The shopkeeper then talks to them about werewolves and killing them with silver bullets. They ask him if he believes in any of it, but the shopkeeper says he's just trying to make money, and he sells them a handful of books. Bill walks back towards the house with the dead rabbit in hand. One of the men tells him his sister would love to cook the rabbit. His sister is Marcia. Bill walks inside, and Marcia prepares the rabbit. He asks how long it will take, but Marcia tells him she'll cook it later before walking over and kissing Bill. He again resists her advances and leaves abruptly. He walks home in the dark, full moon high in the sky, when he hears rustling around him. He stops to look around as sharp organ music plays. He turns as he hears howling in the distance, when suddenly he is attacked by an animal. He is scratched on the arm, but manages to escape and get back to the cabin. Karen opens the door and takes him to Dr. Wagner, who administers a shot. Karen says she wants to go home, but Dr. Wagner advises against it. And this is the end of Act 1. Okay, so to this point, there isn't a ton of action, and it seems like the movie is setting us up slowly. And what little action there is cloaked in shadows. When Eddie attacks Karen at the beginning, we see little to nothing. When Bill is attacked by an animal at the end, we see little to nothing. This seems to be by design, because along these veiled scenes are more explicit ones. Specifically, when the morgue freezer is discovered to be empty. Eddie, the serial killer, who goes by Eddie the Mangler, was shot and killed by a police officer, is suddenly missing, with the only clue being scratches on the inside of the morgue freezer. I think it's important to avoid interpreting a lack of action as boring, because there's a creepy undercurrent to this whole film. The nighttime shots of the seedy city underbelly giving way to the odd community at the colony. All of it just feels off, like a nagging feeling that you can't quite put your finger on. Alright, let's jump into Act 2. Terry and Chris lie in bed, watching TV and flipping through the pages of a book. The phone rings, and whoever is on the other line tells them Bill was bitten by a wolf, just as the television program says that he who is bitten by a werewolf becomes one as well. Terry drives to the colony, and Karen is overjoyed to see her as the two walk and talk. Terry encourages Karen and apologizes to Bill for not bringing vegetables. Bill is a vegetarian, but strangely, he is now eating meat. Karen and Bill lay in bed, with Bill reading and Karen hinting at intimacy. Bill resists, saying the shots have affected him. Karen is frustrated by this and turns over to fall asleep. Karen then has flashbacks, and when she wakes up, she notices Bill is not in bed. Instead, he's walking in the woods, where he meets up with Marcia. The two have sex by a fire. Karen opens the window to her room and grabs a flashlight as she hears moaning and wailing in the distance. As Marcia and Bill have sex, we hear him groan and watch as the two begin a scary transformation. Sharp fangs appear in their mouths as they growl. They suddenly spring hair, and their facial features change to that of a wolf. Marcia scratches Bill's back with sharp claws. Okay, there's something really interesting about this transformation scene. First, the practical effects are pretty terrific. And even though we don't see a full body transformation, the makeup, prosthetics, and hair are all super effective. We watch as Bill and Marcia go from being fully human to becoming human-like werewolves. And there's something else. As the transformation occurs, the scene shift is almost cartoon-like. In fact, it's a stop-motion sequence, and it's really unique because it's the only time it happens in the movie. While to us, it may be a stylized way of depicting the transformation, the reality is that it was done primarily because of budget constraints. I'll be honest, as a viewer I found it a little jarring, because it's so different than anything else in the movie. Jarring isn't necessarily bad, but I'm really thankful it was the only time they used it. The scene shifts to the daytime as Terry is sitting on the beach. Karen is asleep in bed as Bill comes in quietly to wake her up. Terry walks back up the hill, looking back a few times at the water. Suddenly, she recognizes the landscape in front of her. It matches the drawing she found in Eddie's apartment. Now she knows something is up. Sharp organ music plays as she walks through the woods, the sounds of bugs and birds and animals filling the air around her. Suddenly, she hears a voice whisper her name, but when she turns, she sees no one there. She continues walking, when suddenly a hairy claw rises from somewhere behind her. She takes a deep breath as she approaches a cabin, animal skins nailed to the outside. She walks carefully up the stairs and looks in the windows before peeking into the door. She hears fluttering behind her, and as she turns, she notices a side door slightly open. She walks in carefully, the creaking door filling the air around her. She calls out to see if anyone is there, when suddenly, we see the hairy legs of an animal walking in the woods, growling as it goes. She walks into the cabin and looks around. The place is cluttered and dark. As she walks, we hear the sound of dripping water and her boots on the hardwood. She snaps a few pictures, including a smiley face sticker on a door. It's the same smiley face that Karen saw earlier. When she walks into the room, she notices newspaper clippings all over the walls. She snaps a few more pictures, when suddenly, the door starts shaking violently as growling fills the air. She escapes and jumps out a window, grabbing a hatchet that is set into a log. As she tries to crawl to safety, a huge clawed hand grabs her by the shoulder. She fights to escape, but the animal breaks the wall around her and grabs her by the foot. Terry swings the hatchet wildly, cutting off the animal's arm. She watches in horror as it transforms from a hairy, animal-like arm into a human arm and hand. Alright, real quick. This short transformation scene is unbelievably great. The practical effects are stunning, and at least to me, still hold up today. I've said it before, but I will always love special effects over CGI. Having narrowly escaped, Terry runs quickly through the woods back into the main cabin, where she slams the door behind her and picks up the phone. We get a quick cutscene of a clawed hand touching the tape recorder Terry left behind in the cabin. Another quick cutscene takes us back to Karen and Bill, who is dressing his wound and getting dressed. Karen notices the scratches on Bill's back, and she asks him if he's been with Marcia. Bill denies it, but Karen persists, leading to Bill backhanding her across the face. He attempts to comfort Karen, but she's not having it. She gets up and leaves, but Bill grabs her by the arms and tries to get her to stay. She pushes away and leaves the cabin entirely. Alright, so another quick drop-in. There are times, especially when watching older movies, when you'll come across a really shitty scene. Bill slapping Karen in the face is one of those. Now I know we're talking about this movie 45 years after its release, but this is one of those scenes that gets under my skin. Looking at it contextually, Bill's assault was entirely unjustified. Karen knew that he'd slept with Marcia, and she rightly called him out on it. Bill, for his part, was too much of a coward to admit it, so he simply slapped her in the face. I'll just say this: fuck that guy. Bill deserves whatever happens to him. The scene then shifts to Terry talking with Chris on the phone. She's telling him that Eddie is still alive. She tells him about the pictures they found and how they match the actual landscape at the colony. She tells him she thinks Eddie is part of whatever is going on over there. She says she's okay, and he asks her to look in the filing cabinet for the name Quist. As she rummages through the files, she finds Marcia's and TC's. Suddenly, a large hairy hand grabs the file out of her hand, and when she looks, a huge werewolf is sneering at her. Terry drops the phone, and we get a wide pan shot of Terry and the werewolf standing side by side. It's at least 2 feet taller than her. Chris listens helplessly as the wolf attacks her. Terry scrambles on the floor, trying to find safety, as Chris calls the sheriff's office. She turns on a UV light, which blinds the wolf temporarily. But within a few seconds, it continues its attack. The wolf lifts Terry off the ground and grabs her by the neck as she struggles. It snarls and growls at her, before biting her neck, killing her instantly. And this is the end of Act 2. Alright, so Act 2 was a lot shorter than Act 1. And honestly, it really didn't need to be much longer, because what we got in Act 2 was really the meat and potatoes of this movie. This is the first time we've seen the full size and shape of the werewolf, and it's seriously impressive. Like before, the makeup and practical effects are terrific, and we get a true sense of just how terrifying this creature really is. Something that really helps me appreciate these scenes, and honestly practical effects in general, is to put myself in the character's shoes, because I think it's too easy to dismiss these effects as cheesy or not scary. But by putting myself in the character's shoes, I'm able to regain some of that awe factor. I mean, imagine scrambling to safety, only to be cornered by a massive beast with 3-inch fangs, razor-sharp claws, and a murderous personality. If I saw this thing in real life, I'd shit my pants. And that's exactly the point. Like I mentioned earlier, Act 1 set us up for something big. All that suspense building was to lead us to Terry's epiphany, discovery, attack, and subsequent death. It's really interesting, because Karen and Bill, who to this point had been the main focus of the film, are sidelined for much of Act 2, with Terry and Chris taking the lead. At this point, we have multiple parallel narratives, and it works really, really well, because Terry's experience with the werewolf validates Karen's suspicions and fears about the colony. And, as you're hoping for Terry to alert Karen about what's really going on, well, the werewolf has other ideas, leaving Chris to scramble and Karen to discover the horrifying truth one way or another. Alright, let's jump back into it and explore Act 3. Chris scrambles as he buys a small case of silver bullets from the used bookshop from earlier. Karen walks through the woods, crying as she walks towards Dr. Wagner's office. She rushes in and discovers the mess made by Terry's encounter with the werewolf. And after pulling back a curtain, she sees Terry's mangled body. Karen grabs the phone and hears howling in the background. As she backs up, someone sits up from where Terry was just lying. Karen falls to the ground and notices Terry's body on the floor, a new figure now stalking her in the room. Suddenly, Karen drops a bomb, calling him Eddie. Eddie says he wanted to see her again, and Karen says she saw him die. Eddie says he trusted Karen, and he proceeds to dig a bullet out of his skull before transforming into a werewolf. Alright, I've said it a few times already, but holy shit, the special effects in Eddie's transformation scene are so damn good. The prosthetics, makeup, use of bladders, it adds a horrifying realism to these scenes that CGI simply cannot touch. Karen watches as Eddie transforms before her eyes, going from man to werewolf in just a few seconds. Now fully transformed, Karen throws acid on Eddie and backs away as he writhes in pain. A quick cutscene shows Chris pulling up to a gas station before Karen rushes to her car. The sheriff and another man bang on the hood of the car and take her back towards the cabin, where several others are waiting for her. Terry's body is lying on a table as Marcia stands at center. Karen pans the room before Dr. Wagner comes out of the shadows. She runs to him, thinking he will help her, but he tells her no. Meanwhile, Chris rushes through traffic to get to the colony. As Dr. Wagner tells her about the gift, Donna tells her it was the best gift she's ever gotten. Several others chime in, arguing about whether Karen is worthy of being there. Dr. Wagner cuts in before Marcia cuts him off. She tells him he's through, saying Karen belongs to the colony. Chris pulls in at the colony, rifle in hand, just as Karen runs to try and escape. Dr. Wagner argues with Marcia, who immediately scratches his face. Chris walks into Dr. Wagner's office, which he finds in disarray, with blood all over the floor. He listens to Terry's recording and sees blood on the buttons. He sets the rifle down and walks over to the filing cabinet, looking through the files Terry pulled out. Suddenly, he sees the shadow of an animal on the wall, and as he grabs his gun, Eddie breaks the glass to the office and grabs Chris's rifle. Chris asks about Terry, and Eddie says she's down the path. Eddie, still partially transformed, revels in the recording of his attack on Terry. Eddie hands Chris the rifle and tells him to shoot him, before starting his transformation. Chris shoots him twice, including once in the throat. The sheriff then instructs the others to set up Karen's death to look like a car accident, when Chris suddenly bursts in, rifle in hand. As one of the men transform, Chris fires and kills him, to everyone's surprise. He fires again, killing Donna's husband. Dr. Wagner moves towards Chris, and he fires, killing the doctor as well. Marcia and the others are now transforming, and Chris pushes them back into the cabin, locking the door with his gun. He pours gasoline around the outside of the building and lights it on fire. Shrieks and growls fill the air as Chris and Terry escape. The two get into Chris's car as a werewolf slams through the ceiling. Karen fires and they drive away. Suddenly, an officer is standing in the middle of the roadway, transforming while firing on Chris and Terry. Chris shoots him as werewolves surround the car. Chris starts the car, but as they drive away, Karen is bitten in the shoulder by a wolf. She fires, killing the wolf instantly. And as the two drive to safety, it's revealed that the wolf that bit Karen was her husband, Bill. The next scene takes us to the news station, where Karen is being prepped with makeup. Chris says he's not sure he can do this, but Karen says he has to. Another news anchor tells the story of the fire at the colony, and Karen is introduced on air. She reads a bizarre statement about the duality of mankind and how humans are different than animals. She tells of the secret society of the werewolves. The producers scramble to cut, but Karen then begins transforming into a werewolf, right on the air. She howls in agony as she goes from woman to wolf, a single tear streaming down her face. The scene cuts to viewers at home. They're all watching as she transforms into a wolf. Chris then pulls his rifle, shooting Karen before the station cuts to commercial. A few men are sitting at a bar talking about special effects, unfazed by what they'd just seen. One of the men calls for the cook to make a hamburger for a lady, who is revealed to be Marcia. She asks for a rare hamburger. Then, the end credits roll as the cook prepares the burger. The Howling has officially come to an end. Alright, so I have a few thoughts about the ending of this movie, because I felt as though it was abrupt and a little bit underwhelming. First, Karen's transformation was a little bit startling, for all the wrong reasons. Because while every other wolf looked like a wolf, Karen looked like a Pomeranian. To me, it was a rare miss in this film. And I think that goes hand in hand with how rushed the ending felt. It all happens in about 2 to 3 minutes. 1 minute Karen is reading a statement, the next she's transforming into a wolf/dog, and then Chris finally shoots her. The climax to me was highly unsatisfying. Also, I wasn't a huge fan of Dee Wallace's performance in this movie. I felt like she was incredibly subdued for most of it. She didn't offer much emotional range, and was surprisingly stoic when the situation might have called for a greater emotional display. I also realize her character is suffering from PTSD, and at times was near catatonic, so it's possible her flatness was just part of the role. Overall though, I really enjoyed this movie, and I learned something new. It's loosely based on a 1977 novel by Gary Brandner. I bought it for my Kindle, and I'm really looking forward to reading it while I'm on vacation next week. I've already mentioned the things that worked really well for me in this film, but there's something else I haven't mentioned, the satire scattered throughout the movie. It's obvious the movie is self-aware and doesn't take itself too seriously, while at the same time, it delivers some genuinely effective transformation scenes and navigates complex and serious subjects. On the one hand, the movie explores themes of self-indulgence and its consequences, while also taking shots at the news for sensationalizing, even glorifying violence. Sexuality and sexual violence are always in the background. For example, when the camera pans the adult shops in the beginning, when Karen is attacked in the adult theater, Marcia's sexual advances on Bill, and Karen's struggle to overcome her PTSD. There's an irony in play in here as well, and a Collider article expresses it perfectly. Quote, "If you use what is deemed acceptable for television as a metric, violence is totally okay, even graphic torture and mutilation, as long as we don't see bare genitalia or an exposed nipple. The way Karen and her producers behave as though the porn shop represents the worst parts of humanity, while simultaneously making money off sensationalized coverage of Eddie's murders, is Dante pointing out how we want to have our cake and eat it too, pretending that a culture of media consumption that regularly feeds those conflicting ideas had nothing to do with Eddie's obsession with sexual violence." End quote. I've said it in every episode, and I'll say it again. One of my favorite portions of the show is highlighting what you all think of the movie. As usual, I asked folks on Instagram and Threads to tell me their thoughts, good and bad, on The Howling. And as usual, you all delivered. From Real Talk, it's my number 4. An American Werewolf in London, The Wolfman from 1941, and Silver Bullet are all just above it. I'm a huge fan of Dee Wallace. I would watch any horror film she would appear in. The Hills Have Eyes, Cujo, Critters, and so many more. From OEHF.official, sitting pretty on my top spot of werewolf movies. From Brothers in Blood podcast, in the top 5 among An American Werewolf in London, Ginger Snaps, The Wolfman from 1941 and 2010. From In Dark We Rise pod, it's my number 1 because I saw it first. It's one of the few great werewolf films. The combination of horror and film noir is fantastic. And that scene with Eddie and Dee Wallace throwing the acid on him is a proximity scare. Also, great practical effects transformation. From Fear on Film podcast, for me it's the number 1 spot. An American Werewolf in London is number 2. Dog Soldiers is number 3. Ginger Snaps is number 4. And Silver Bullet is number 5. From Gory Rory III, it ranks just below The Howling 2, Your Sister is a Werewolf, and Wolf Cop. From LG Wells, wait, there are other werewolf movies. From Roses B0610, top 5. From The Scary Movie Project, top 5. From Super Stacy 318, I love The Howling and is definitely in the middle. Lon Chaney's Wolfman is good, and who can forget Ginger Snaps? Awesome, of course. From Zombie Souffle, top 5 for sure. From Beats on the Horror Express 79, it's in my top 3 with An American Werewolf in London and Silver Bullet. From Pamela K.Kinney.author, in my top 10. The novel was great too. From Horror Punk Reads, somewhere in the middle, with American Werewolf at the top and Light of Blood at the bottom. From Halloween Babies podcast, for me it's probably number 2 to 3 if you're talking pre-2000, but overall it's around number 10. From Schlockluster, a real great entry in the lycanthrope lexicon, in my honest opinion. Really helped breathe some new life in the werewolf genre. And along with An American Werewolf in London, it set the standard for the genre for decades. From Tanya Contois, it's been years since I've seen it, but I did like it. Now I'm going to have to see if it's available to watch anywhere. From Andy C.T. writes, anyone who insists that vampires are the horniest monsters hasn't seen The Howling, and they certainly haven't seen The Howling 2. From Michelle Bauman, writer, I grew up watching The Howling. I love it. The book was good too. From Satir_John, the sequels are consistently trashy, but the original Howling holds up. It has great transformation sequences and an interesting story. It remains one of the best werewolf movies out there, in my opinion, and it's in the same league as An American Werewolf in London, Ginger Snaps, or The Company of Wolves. From The Real Hope Giver 1, it is only second to An American Werewolf in London for me. I love it. The special effects were brilliant as Botten came out from Baker's shadow into his own light. From Well Worth a Read, it's my favorite and I still watch it once a year. It was the first time I ever saw a werewolf transformation that wasn't just a mask and hairy gloves with claws. From Coffee and Cannabis, 8.5 out of 10. Still holds up to this day. From Justin Loves Music 40, I'd rate it an 8. Not quite as great as An American Werewolf in London. From Miyako 333, The Howling is a top fave. I've always loved the SFX, the best werewolves. When I was in indie film, my dream was to become a big enough director to remake it for this time. To be honest though, it's perfect the way it is. And from SK Nez 76, I like An American Werewolf in London better. I mentioned earlier that I'm not a huge fan of werewolf movies, though I do have a few favorites. Number 1 is An American Werewolf in London. Number 2 is Silver Bullet. And number 3, which might surprise you, is An American Werewolf in Paris. I'll admit, I've never seen Ginger Snaps, so that's on my list to be watched, especially because so many of you mentioned it in your best of lists. Alright, that's a wrap for this episode. As always, thanks for spending your time with me on One Good Scare. I don't take it for granted. And of course, be sure to join me next episode as we dive headfirst into one of my favorite horror remakes, 2013's Evil Dead. Till next time, I'm your host Will. Thanks for hanging out.